I stood on the front porch of my new house, keys trembling in my hand. 10 years. 10 years of working 2 jobs, eating instant noodles, and living in a studio apartment that barely fit a bed. But this 3-bedroom house with its small backyard was finally mine. Every mortgage payment would come from my own account. Every sacrifice had been worth it. This was mine. I felt that rush of accomplishment wash over me like nothing else ever had. Then my phone rang. Dad's name flashed across the screen. His voice sounded different, cold, flat. He said we needed to talk. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from right now. Go ahead and hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will show you exactly why standing your ground sometimes means losing everyone you thought you knew. Trust me, you will want to hear how my parents tried to steal my house right out from under me. Growing up, I always knew I was different from my brother Trevor. He was 5 years older, and seemed to glide through life, while I stumbled through every obstacle. When Trevor wanted to go to college, Mom and Dad wrote the checks without hesitation. He dropped out after 2 years to pursue his dream of becoming a musician. That dream lasted about 6 months before he moved back home. When it was my turn, Dad sat me down and explained that money was tight. I would need to figure it out myself. So I did. I worked at a coffee shop before classes and stocked shelves at a grocery store after. I graduated with $40,000 in student debt, while Trevor slept in his childhood bedroom rent-free. After graduation, Trevor got married to a woman named Sharon. They had 2 kids within 3 years. During that entire time, they lived in my parents' basement. Dad called it helping family. I called it enabling. Meanwhile, I was grinding. I landed a job as an IT consultant and picked up freelance work designing websites on the side. Every spare dollar went toward paying off my loans. I lived in a 400-square-foot studio where my bed touched the kitchen counter. I ate pasta and canned soup. I never took vacations. My coworkers would talk about their weekend trips to the coast, and I would smile and nod while calculating how many hours I needed to work to make next month's payment. But I had a goal. I wanted a house, not a mansion, not something fancy. Just a place that was mine. Somewhere I could paint the walls whatever color I wanted. Somewhere I could have people over without feeling embarrassed. So I saved. For 10 years, I put away every possible cent. I stopped going out with friends. I drove a beat-up sedan that burned oil. I wore the same 5 shirts in rotation. People thought I was cheap. They did not understand I was building something. Last spring, I finally had enough for a down payment. I found a house about 30 minutes outside Portland. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a backyard that needed work but had potential. The place needed cosmetic updates, but it was structurally sound and within my budget. The day I closed on that house, I sat in the empty living room and cried. Nobody was there to see it. Nobody had helped me get there. And that made it even more meaningful. I moved in 2 weeks later. I spent my first night on an air mattress because I had not bought furniture yet. I did not care. I walked through each room, touching the walls, looking out the windows, feeling this overwhelming sense of pride. This was what independence felt like. This was what happened when you refused to give up. Then on a Wednesday morning, my phone rang. Dad's voice came through sharp and businesslike. He said we needed to have a family meeting. Saturday afternoon at their place. He did not ask if I was available. He just told me to be there. The tone made me nervous, but I figured maybe someone was sick. Maybe they needed help with something. I said I would come. Saturday arrived and I drove to my parents' house feeling anxious. When I walked in, I saw the whole family gathered in the living room. Trevor sat on the couch with Sharon beside him. Their 2 kids played on the floor with toys. Mom was in her usual chair by the window. Dad stood near the fireplace like he was about to give a presentation. Everyone looked at me as I entered. The air felt heavy. Dad did not waste time with pleasantries. He launched right in. He said they had been thinking about my situation. He said I had just bought a house. 3 bedrooms. That was a lot of space. I nodded, still not understanding where this was going. Then he said Trevor had a family now. 2 small children. They were cramped in the basement. Growing kids needed room to play, needed their own space. I agreed with that. Of course, kids needed space. That made sense. Then Dad said it. He said since I was alone and did not need all that room, and since Trevor had kids who did need space, it only made sense that Trevor should get my house. He said it so casually, like he was suggesting I pass the salt at dinner. I actually laughed. I thought he was joking, but nobody else was laughing. Mom spoke up then. She said I had done well for myself. I had proven I could manage. I could easily find a nice apartment. I had lived in small spaces before. This would not be a hardship for me. But for Trevor, for those children, my house would change everything. She said it was the right thing to do. The family thing to do. I looked at Trevor. He would not meet my eyes. He just sat there picking at a thread on his jeans, while Sharon nodded along with everything my parents said. I felt like I was in some alternate reality. I said no. I said I had worked 10 years for that house. I had sacrificed everything. The house was mine, and I was not giving it to anyone. Dad's face went red. His jaw clenched. He asked if I understood what family meant. He said after everything they had done for me, this was how I repaid them. I asked what exactly they had done for me. I paid for my own education. I bought my own car. I furnished my own apartments. What had they actually provided that I owed them? My house. Mom stood up slowly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were ice. She said I was making a mistake. She said I should think very carefully about this decision. I said there was nothing to think about. The house was not up for discussion. I turned to leave. That is when Mom said the words that would haunt me. She smiled this cold little smile and said, if I would not do the right thing willingly, they would just take it another way. The way she said it made my blood run cold. It was not anger. It was certainty. Like she already had a plan. I left without saying goodbye. My hands shook so badly I could barely get my key in the ignition. I drove home in a daze. I kept replaying that smile, that threat. What did she mean? They would take it another way. How could they possibly take my house? The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Dad. I ignored it. He called 3 more times. Then Mom started calling. I let them go to voicemail. The messages were all variations of the same theme. Think about your niece and nephew. Do not be selfish. Family helps family. This is what good people do. After the 10th message, I blocked their numbers. Within an hour, they were calling from different numbers. Mom used her work phone. Dad called from Trevor's cell. I blocked those too. Then the text messages started coming from relatives. My Aunt Linda sent a long message about how disappointed she was in me. My Uncle Frank said I had always been the cold one in the family. My cousin Jenna said she could not believe I would let children suffer when I had the power to help. I tried to explain to a few of them what was actually happening, but nobody wanted to hear it. They had already decided I was the villain. By afternoon, Trevor sent an email. It was 3 paragraphs long, detailing his financial struggles. He wrote about how hard it was to raise kids in a basement, how Sharon was depressed living with his parents, how my niece had asked why they could not have their own house like other families. He said he was not asking for charity. He would pay me back somehow. He just needed this one thing, this one help. I deleted the email without responding. That evening, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Trevor had posted something. I normally did not check social media much, but curiosity got the better of me. What I saw made me sick. He had written a long post about family betrayal. He did not name me directly, but anyone who knew our family would know exactly who he meant. He wrote about working hard to provide for his family but hitting hard times. About having a brother with a big empty house who refused to help. About how blood meant nothing anymore when people were selfish. The post had already gotten 70 likes and 30 comments. People I had gone to high school with were commenting about how awful I was. How could someone turn their back on family like that? What kind of person lets kids suffer? My phone started buzzing with messages from old friends. People I had not talked to in years suddenly wanted to know what was going on. Was it true? I had refused to help my brother. Did I really have this big house? While he struggled, I tried explaining to a few people, but it was exhausting. The story had already been written. I was the bad guy. I stopped sleeping well. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was wrong. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should just give them what they wanted and start over. But then I would think about those 10 years. The ramen noodles, the double shifts, the loneliness, the sacrifice. I had not stolen this house. I had earned it. Why should I give it up? Because Trevor made different choices. My friend Marcus came over that Friday. He had seen the Facebook post and some of the comments. He brought pizza and beer and let me vent. He said my family was insane. He said what they were asking was not normal. Normal families did not demand you hand over your house. He told me not to back down. He said the moment I gave in, they would know they could take anything from me. I appreciated Marcus. He was one of the few people who seemed to understand this was not about being generous. This was about boundaries. The harassment continued all week. But Friday evening it escalated. I got home from work around 6 p.m. and found them, all three of them, Dad, Mom, and Trevor, standing on my front porch. I pulled into the driveway and just sat in my car for a minute, trying to decide what to do. I could drive away. But this was my house. I was not going to be scared away from my own home. I got out and walked toward them. Dad started immediately. He said they were not leaving until I listened to reason. I said there was nothing to discuss and asked them to leave. He refused. He said I was being stubborn and stupid, that I was tearing the family apart over bricks and wood. I said I was not the one making demands. I was just keeping what was mine. Mom stepped forward then. Her voice was soft, almost sweet. She said she had given birth to me, raised me, clothed me, fed me. She said I owed her my life. Everything I was came from her. Giving up the house was the least I could do to repay that debt. I felt something crack inside me. I told her I did not ask to be born. That was her choice. And raising your child is not a transaction. Parents do not get to cash in on their kids like investments. Trevor finally spoke. He had been quiet until then. He said I had always thought I was better than him, smarter, more responsible. He said I looked down on him, and now I was proving it. I told him I did not look down on him. I just refused to pay for his choices. He had chosen to drop out of college, to have kids before he could support them, to live off our parents. Those were his decisions. I had made different decisions. That did not make me his bank account. Dad lost his temper completely. He started yelling, saying I was ungrateful, disrespectful. He demanded I hand over the keys right then and there. He said the house should be in Trevor's name by the end of the month. I said that would never happen, and asked them one more time to leave. That is when Mom delivered the threat. She looked at me with this cold, calm expression and said, since I would not do this the right way, they would just take it another way. The same words from before. Dad nodded. Trevor looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Mom smiled. That same chilling smile. I went inside and locked the door. I watched through the window as they stood there for another 5 minutes before finally leaving. I sat in the dark living room for an hour after they left, my heart pounding. What did they mean? They would take it another way. How could they possibly take my house? I did not have to wait long to find out. Monday morning I was getting ready for work when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find a postal worker with a registered letter. I had to sign for it. My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents. My parents were suing me. I read through the papers in disbelief. They were claiming they had given me $50,000 for my down payment. They said it was a loan, not a gift, and they wanted it back immediately. If I could not pay, they were demanding I transfer ownership of the house to Trevor to settle the debt. Attached to the lawsuit was a loan agreement. It had my signature on it, except I had never signed any loan agreement, because I had never received any money from them. I called in sick to work and spent the next hour pacing my house reading and rereading the documents. The signature looked close to mine, but it was not exact. They had forged it. My own parents had forged my signature to steal my house. I called Marcus. He came over within 20 minutes. He read through everything and said I needed a lawyer immediately. He helped me search online and found a lawyer named David Brennan who specialized in real estate fraud. I called and explained the situation. David said he could see me that afternoon. At 3 p.m., I sat in David's office while he reviewed the documents. He was in his mid-40s with gray hair at his temples and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He looked at the loan agreement, then at my actual signature on my driver's license. He said the signatures did not match. I told him that was because I never signed it. I told him I had never received a single dollar from my parents. David asked if I had proof. I pulled out my laptop and showed him 10 years of bank statements. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every transfer. He could see my entire financial history. There was no $50,000 deposit from my parents. There was nothing. Every cent in my down payment had come from my own paychecks. David leaned back in his chair and said I had a strong case, but he warned me that my parents might have more tricks up their sleeves. He suggested we dig deeper into the property records. He contacted the title company that had handled my closing and requested a full history of any activity related to my property. What came back 3 days later made me physically ill. 3 weeks earlier, someone had attempted to add Trevor's name to my deed. My mother had gone to the county recorder's office with a power of attorney document, claiming she had legal authority to modify my property title. The only reason it had not gone through was because one diligent clerk had asked for additional verification. When my mom could not provide it, the request was denied. But the attempt was there in the record. I sat in David's office staring at the report. I asked if he was telling me my mother had tried to literally steal my house by adding Trevor's name to the deed. He nodded. He said this went beyond a family dispute. This was fraud. This was forgery. This was attempted theft. He said I could countersue them, and he strongly recommended filing criminal charges. I felt sick. These were my parents. Yes, they were awful. Yes, they had always favored Trevor, but sending them to jail felt impossible. I told David I needed time to think. He said to take a day, but not more. They were already escalating. Who knew what they would try next? That night I did not sleep at all. I thought about every memory I had of my parents. Birthday parties where Trevor got the better presents. School events where they praised his mediocre efforts but barely acknowledged my achievements. Every time I had asked for help and been told to figure it out myself, while Trevor got handed everything, they had never seen me as their son. They had seen me as a resource, something to be used. The next morning I called David and told him to do it. File the countersuit. File the criminal charges. I was done being nice. I was done being the understanding one. They had tried to steal from me, and I was going to make sure everyone knew it. David moved fast. Within a week he had filed a countersuit accusing my parents of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. He submitted all my bank records as evidence. He included the expert analysis, showing the signature on their fake loan agreement was forged. He submitted the county records, showing my mother's attempt to fraudulently modify my deed. And he filed a police report. The police took it seriously. Fraud involving property is a felony. They opened an investigation. They interviewed the clerk at the county office who had denied my mother's request. They examined the forged documents. They pulled phone records showing the extensive harassment campaign. During their investigation, they discovered something else. My mother had contacted a real estate agent about selling my house. She had pretended to be me using information she knew about my finances. She was trying to sell my house out from under me. The real estate agent had gotten suspicious when the contact information did not match the property records and had not moved forward, but the attempt was there. My parents hired a lawyer, a cheap one. They tried to claim this was all a misunderstanding, that the loan agreement was real, and I was the one lying. But their lawyer could not explain why there was no record of them ever having $50,000 to lend me. He could not explain the forged signature. He could not explain my mother's attempt to modify the deed without my knowledge. He could not explain her attempt to sell my property. Their case fell apart before it even started. 2 months later, we had our day in court. I sat on one side of the courtroom with David. My parents and Trevor sat on the other side with their lawyer. The judge was a woman in her 60s who looked like she had seen everything and was not impressed by any of it. The hearing lasted 3 hours. David presented every piece of evidence. My bank records going back 10 years. The forged signature analysis. The county office records. The attempted sale. My parents' lawyer tried to argue they were just trying to help their family, but the judge shut that down fast. She said forgery was not help. Theft was not family values. At the end, the judge dismissed my parents' lawsuit with prejudice, meaning they could never try to sue me for this again. Then she ruled on my countersuit. She found them guilty of attempted fraud. She ordered them to pay all my legal fees, which totaled $15,000. She issued a restraining order, preventing them from coming within 500 feet of me or my property, and she referred the criminal charges to the district attorney's office. A month later, my parents pled guilty to a misdemeanor fraud charge. They each got 2 years probation community service and the misdemeanor on their permanent records. Trevor was not charged, but his name was all over the case. Everyone knew what they had tried to do. The family fell apart. Some relatives apologized to me, saying they had not known the full story. Others blamed me for taking my parents to court. I cut off anyone who could not understand why I had to protect myself. The Facebook post Trevor had made was still up, but now people were commenting about how he and my parents had tried to steal from me. He eventually deleted it, but screenshots had been taken. His reputation was ruined. The months after the trial were strange. I felt exhausted, like I had been running for years and finally stopped. But I also felt lighter. I did not have to worry about my parents showing up. I did not have to answer angry calls. I did not have to defend my right to keep what I had earned. At first, the silence was painful. I had lost my entire immediate family. Mom, Dad, Trevor, even Sharon and the kids. My niece and nephew would grow up thinking I was the bad uncle who had hurt their parents. That hurt more than I expected. I had imagined being a good uncle someday, taking them to ball games, teaching them things. That future was gone now. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Sarah Kim, and she specialized in family trauma. She helped me understand that what I had experienced was abuse, financial abuse, emotional manipulation, gaslighting. My parents had spent my entire life conditioning me to believe I owed them everything while giving me nothing. She taught me about boundaries, about how healthy families do not operate on debt and obligation, about how children are not investments. The therapy helped. Slowly, I stopped feeling guilty. I stopped wondering if I had overreacted. I had not sent my parents to jail. They had sent themselves there by committing crimes. I had simply protected what was mine. I threw myself into making the house truly mine. I spent weekends painting the bedroom a deep blue. I tore out the old carpet and installed hardwood floors. Marcus came over to help me build raised garden beds in the backyard. We planted tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. I bought furniture piece by piece. A couch that I actually liked, not whatever was cheapest. A bed frame that was not second-hand. Art for the walls that I chose because it made me happy. Work got better too. Without the constant stress of my family drama, I could focus. I got promoted to senior consultant with a 20% raise. I used the money to pay off the last of my legal fees and started saving again. This time not for a down payment, just for life. Marcus became my brother in all the ways that mattered. He was there every Sunday for dinner. We took turns cooking. We watched football games and argued about which teams were better. When his girlfriend broke up with him, he crashed on my couch for a week, and I made him breakfast every morning. When I got food poisoning from bad sushi, he showed up with medicine and stayed to make sure I did not die. That is what family was supposed to be. People who showed up, not people who took. I also reconnected with my Uncle Frank, my dad's older brother. He reached out 6 months after the trial. He said he had heard my side and wanted to apologize. He told me stories about my dad growing up, about how he had always been entitled and jealous, how my grandfather had spoiled him. Frank said he had tried to warn me when I was younger, but I had been too loyal to see it. We started meeting for coffee once a month. It was nice to have someone from the older generation who understood. A year after the trial, I joined a community center as a volunteer. I taught a class on financial literacy for young people. I showed them how to budget, how to save, how to avoid debt. But mostly I taught them that nobody had the right to guilt them into giving up what they earned. I told them about boundaries, about protecting themselves. Several of them came up after class and thanked me. One young woman said her parents were pressuring her to co-sign a loan for her brother, and she had been feeling terrible about saying no. After my class, she felt strong enough to refuse. That made everything worth it. I dated a little. Nothing serious. I was still figuring out what I wanted. But I was not lonely anymore. I had friends. I had a home. I had peace. Sometimes I drove past my parents' house. I never stopped. I just looked as I went by. The house looked the same. I wondered if they ever thought about what they had done. If they regretted it. If they missed me. Probably not. People like that do not see their actions as wrong. They see themselves as victims. I thought about Trevor sometimes, too. I heard through Uncle Frank that he finally got a job. Nothing great, but something. He and Sharon had moved into a small rental house. The kids were doing okay. Part of me was glad. I never wanted the kids to suffer. But I felt nothing for Trevor himself. No anger, no sadness, just nothing. He had sat there while my parents tried to steal from me. He had been willing to take my house knowing what it cost me. That was not someone I needed in my life. The house stopped being just a house. It became a symbol. Every time I walked through the front door, I remembered standing my ground. I remembered choosing myself when everyone demanded I sacrifice for them. The 3 bedrooms were not too big. One was mine. One was an office. One was for guests. Marcus stayed over sometimes. Uncle Frank crashed there once after we had too much wine at dinner. The space was full of life. My life. One evening I sat on my back porch watching the sun set over my garden. The tomatoes were coming in heavy. I could smell the herbs growing wild. I thought about that moment when Dad had demanded I give Trevor my house. How impossible it had seemed to say no. How guilty I had felt. But I had learned something crucial. Family is not just blood. Family is respect. It is trust. It is support. My parents taught me what family should not be. And honestly, that was valuable too. They showed me exactly what I did not want to become. I would never see another person as something I was owed. I would never guilt someone into sacrificing for me. I would never take without giving. I did not hate them. Hate takes energy, and they did not deserve any more of my energy. I just did not have space in my life for people who saw me as a resource instead of a person, who saw me as a son they could exploit instead of a son they should love. As for Trevor, I hoped he figured things out. I hoped he learned to stand on his own feet. I hoped his kids grew up happy. But that was not my responsibility. I had spent enough years trying to meet impossible standards, trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. I was done with that. The house was not just 4 walls and a roof anymore. It was proof that I had chosen myself when everyone else wanted me to disappear. That choice did not just save my house. It saved my life. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family that others did not understand? Have you been pressured to give up something you worked for? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, go ahead and smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss more stories about standing your ground and finding your worth. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it is okay to protect what they have earned. Thank you for being here and listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there realize they are not alone. Take care of yourselves. You deserve to keep what you have built.